Visions of the Black Heaven. Written by Daniel Zien, read by Daniel Zien. Chapter 35. Trooper Williams sat in the loft watching Hans, Woodard, and Old Man Schroeder break into the cabin. He felt a sense of panic as a horrid stench filled the air. Then a shadow appeared on the wall next to the front door. It started out as a tiny black dot, then rapidly grew into a physical shadow form of a human being. He heard his grandmother chanting the prayer of protection, then shuddered in fear, watching the shadow move off the wall, becoming a faceless, three-dimensional figure standing next to Woodard. Hans looked around the room, focusing on the bookcases, walked over to the shelves. Looking at a few books, he tries to read the words and notes written in a language he cannot understand. Woodard and the shadow walked around the room, appeared as if they were talking mind to mind, looking for something. The shadow looked toward the chest, then the loft. The shadow pointed to the chest. Hans saw the large wooden chest. He knew the medallions were locked in the chest. Looking for a weapon, Hans saw a small axe. Raising the tool above his head to open the contents, he started to thrust the axe towards the box. Old Man Schroeder stopped Hans's arm, reaching down to touch. The lock fell open as it moved. The old man's sparkly black eyes curiously looked in the dimness of the velvet-covered grooves as the wooden lid revealed the concealed contents. Old Man Schroeder heard something whispering in his mind. The keys! A shadow of a tall, muscular image appeared on the wall. The image follows the length of the room. It formed into a three-dimensional, faceless being as it exited the confines of the wall's two dimensions. Standing next to the old man, the shadow pointed which objects to choose. The old man felt himself move in unquestioning obedience. He watched his hands as if they had a mind of their own. He felt tingly sensations pulse through his fingers, lifting the two cool objects from their resting place. Ra roared triumphantly, "These are the keys!" Old Man Schroeder put the object on the table, then stood aside. Ra laughed victoriously. "Ha ha! Command the shadow! Connect our worlds!" Everyone watched as the two medallions touched. Nothing happened. "Choose another!" Ra commanded. The old man chose another set. The shadows connected them. Williams felt a moment of relief as the image of Ra, an angry Ra, vanished into the black pinpoint of nothingness. Valterian entered the room as Hans and Woodard started to follow the shadow up to the loft. Hans barked at Victorian. "Where have you been?" Valterian did not answer. The shadow waved its hand. The cave opening came into view as the massive bed moved aside. Walking into the entrance, Hans was astounded at the immensity of the cave. The cave had a natural light which made no sense to him. He noticed the circle of stones with the campfire ashes in the middle. Petrified footsteps in the stone floor. A deep crack in the floor filled by a stream of water flowing through the cave. To one side of the cave was another opening to a smaller cave. On the far side of the smaller cave was a boulder that looked to be fused into the wall. The shadow waved its hand. Nothing happened. It waved its arm again. Still nothing happened. Hans and the shadow stood back, looking at the stone mass. There were clear signs of scratches on the stone floor, signs the obstruction had recently moved. Hans felt around the stone. Hans barked. "Somewhere there's a pressure point system to gain entrance behind the wall. This seems like a Chinese puzzle. There were clues somewhere that was not obvious to find." Studying the monolith, there were no seemingly outstanding clues as to how to remove the bastion. Hans ran his hands up and down the length, the width, height of the stone, looking for a hint of irregularity to open this object. Valterian walked into the small opening of the cave and said, "Hans, you will not find a mechanical device to move that stone." Hans turned around, giving Victorian a mean, evil look that said, "Mind your own business." Valterian snapped. "That boulder is crystal, which has a piezoelectric properties. That opening is sealed with the weight of the stone, but it is also sealed with the electrical charge of the crystal. You need a natural repelling force to release the hold. Even your shadow friend does not have that ability. Hans stood looking at the stone, knowing that little pest of a gnome-like man was right. He turned around to walk out of the cave, mumbling to himself. There has to be a clue in this cabin somewhere. Almost running down the loft stairs, Hans went to the bookcases, looking at book after book, throwing the books he could not read aside. Getting angrier and more frustrated, he threw book after book on the floor, looking into the big roll-top desk, rifling through the drawers, searching for something, anything that seemed logical, stepping over the pile of distracted papers and charts. Hans stomped back to the wooden chest, profuse in anger. Pulling the chest lid open, he grabbed 2 medallions, dropping them on the table, yelling in uncontrollable anger. The gold and fiber medallions touched. There was a sparkling of energy, the light filled with a horrid stench. A wave of lightless void appeared. Old Man Woodard stood by Hans, mesmerized as a cavity of darkness appeared. Ra emerged from the chasm of darkness, screaming in a language no one knew, but everyone understood the sound of anger and hostility. Old Man Schroeder had the facial expression of obedience, looking into the cavity of emptiness. He took a step forward, wanting to please the voice in the dank opening. The old man stepped into the midst of the void. Then Woodard followed. Hans was hesitant. Then a blankness overcame his eyes as his face lost all focus as he obediently stepped into the darkness. Once in, Hans realized what had happened and where he was. They heard their own screaming of agony when the realization hit them. Williams heard echoes of the men yelling for help as the cavity of darkness collapsed around them. Williams was breathless, watching a bright wave of energy open before him, and a stream of lighted warriors chased the remaining shadow figures into the crevasse of darkness before it fully closed into nothing. The noise stopped. Captain Williams stood up, saw a figure in a soiled, long-length, dark woolen overcoat, neither walking nor running, but appeared to be in a constant, clumsy forward fall. Williams had not seen this man walk in and wondered where he had come from. Voltairion heard the noise had stopped. Then he walked out of the cave and saw Captain Williams standing in front of the stairs, watching him, carrying an armful of leather scrolls. The officer had an irritated look in his face. Voltairion heard a deep, booming voice resonating with authority. "Who are you and what are you stealing?" Voltairion stopped in his tracks, saw the Indiana State Trooper. Not knowing what to say, he wondered how he can keep his anonymity yet still secure the scrolls. No one must find out who he really is. Captain Williams had that look of determination in his eye, stood with his hands on his hips in a stance of authority. Voltairion stood looking Williams in the eye. "I am a representative of a foreign government, here to retrieve these articles taken from us many, many years ago." In a deep, sonorous voice of authority, Williams barked, "No, if you want something, then you go through the proper political channels to attain whatever you are wanting, or need, or desire. Put those down and get out of here." Voltairion hesitated. He knew the officer was correct, and he had no way to enforce his authority or will on the law in this country. Lowering the scrolls to the floor, Voltairion left the cabin. Williams wanted to hold this Voltairion for anything he could think of. He was sure that he knew something of what was going on in this mysterious cabin. But his car was a mile away. He had no radio, no support, not anything. He assumed that this strange man would claim diplomatic immunity and not cooperate, so he decided to just let him go. Williams took the scrolls back into the cave. He heard voices. Looking toward the second cave's opening, he saw the boulder slowly open on the other end of the smaller room. Being curious, he put the scrolls back on the pedestal, went into the smaller cave. Looking down the steps, he saw a large area with what looked like billions of pinpoints of light. The voices drifted up the stairs. Walking down the 12 steps, he saw 7 figures. They were talking, laughing, but something was wrong. There was no doubt that Williams heard discussions and laughter, but no one was moving their mouths. Duke turned around, seeing Captain Williams. "Hello, officer." Williams felt himself turn pale. He heard the man talk, but his mouth did not move. Everyone laughed when they realized the officer was growing in this dimension. "Relax, Lynette's voice spoke. This is natural. Trust me, you will never be the same." The lighted beings looked at Grandma and Grandpa. "Are you ready?" "Yes," they said in unison. The couple held hands as they walked through the shimmering blue light into a world of tall, plush fauna, warm breezes, and continual light. Williams caught the scent of a sweet aroma of fresh air like that of a spring day just after a rain as the two walked through the blue light. The lighted beings looked at Thor and Lynette. "You ready?" Thor and Lynette looked at each other, holding hands, and followed Grandma and Grandpa into the blue opening. Another zephyr of fresh air flowed out of the shimmering light. Lynette saw a paradise of unimaginable beauty, fauna of colors she had never even imagined. The birds flew by that welcomed her into this world. The communication was not verbal, but sensational. They understood the intent of a thought. There was no miscommunication. Lynette looked up at the bird, smiling a thank you. Looking around, she heard whispers. It seemed that the trees were whispering welcomes as well. Thor saw 2 giant lighted beings standing by the opening. "What are you for?" he asked one of the lighted beings. They spoke in determined unison. "We are the garrison. In the event that there is an energy breach, the intruder will meet with a defiant resistance." "Has it ever happened in the past?" Thor asked. "No, but that's not to say it is impossible." 2 lighted beings came out of the blue light, walked behind the stairs, lifted the wooden box of ancient art and carried it into the light. Duke and Melody looked Captain Williams in the eye. Then Duke handed something to him. A lighted being faced Williams as he spoke. "The secret is yours to keep and safeguard. You will be given the resources to protect the secret and still have your life as before. You are a man of honor and are worthy of this task." Williams watched as Duke and Melody walked into the light. He saw a paradise of large fauna, fresh fruits, as the 2 new arrivals walked into their new home. Duke looked around and saw Grandpa. He smiled. Grandma looked at Melody. "We have so much to show you. There is no death, no hurt, no sadness. You will not believe the beauty of everything. We can see sounds and hear light. I know it sounds impossible, but you will see." Just then Melody saw a big bear lumbering by, a deer nibbling on the bushes, several chipmunks scurrying around, butterflies floating over the flowers. The bear looked at Duke and Melody and grunted a welcome, then lumbered off into the forest. Lynette spoke to everyone. "This has to be the perfect ending to the most exciting weekend anyone could ever imagine." The 6 walked off into the forest. Grandma whispered, "Wait until you meet the others." Duke and Melody looked at each other, wondering what that meant by the others. William secured the remaining 2 medallions in the chest. Snapping the lock closed, he started picking the papers up Hans had threw on the floor. He checked the fireplace, making sure the fire was out, and then put the oil lamp out. He went to the door, took one last look around. Just before Duke went into the light, he handed him the keys, smiling, and said, "You might need these." Williams watched the 6 vanish into the chasm of blue light. He stood looking at the wall, knowing he saw something unexplainable. Closing and locking the door, he stood on the porch, looking into the strange forest, then walked back to his car.